Hello and welcome to the Horror House Podcast. I'm Dave.
And I am Chris. We're two dudes that like to talk about horror from movies to real life. And this week we're going real life with the Mandela Effect. Dave.
Yeah.
Where did this come from? What is the... Tell the fine rabble.
It gets
the name.
its name from the phenomena where millions of people, or so it seems, misremember Nelson Mandela dying in prison, and which he did not.
No.
He got out of prison, became the president of South Africa, ending apartheid, and the rest of the world lived happily ever after without any conflict forever and ever. Amen. Until he finally died. And
like 20-something years later.
Yeah, a significant amount of time. So it's not even like it was like, oh, well, you were off by 2 days or 2 weeks. No, he was alive for a long time after getting out of prison.
Yeah. And that's where the term comes from. And it applies, like, people misremember or have false memories, altered memories, depending on who you ask, where something is completely different now, or worse, it never existed at all. From book titles to entire movies, continents being in different spots,
characteristics of characters, dialogue in movies.
Yes. And we're going to go through a bunch tonight and just schmooze about the Mandela Effect and maybe get into the horror of it all, if such a thing can be horrific. I think it can.
I definitely think it can, and it has popped up in pop culture several times, including in some horror movies. So definitely something that is on our radar.
So we have all that and more coming right after this ad.
All right, we're back, and Chris, there are lots and lots of examples of the Mandela Effect. Why don't you give us a few examples here? At least, just a few, like 75, and narrow it down to your favorite 10.
I don't know if I have 5 favorite ones. But I mean, some of the essential ones, like the Berenstain Bears. People remember it Berenstein with the E instead of an A. That one, I don't want to go a whole lot into, like why people would remember it a certain way. Here and there, I'm sure we will, but I mean, it was a book you had when you was a kid, right? So of course, I can kind of see that one being a.
It's a fairly iconic book, though. Like, who didn't in America? Mm-hmm. Who didn't grow up and see a Berenstain Bear book or two, or cartoon? There were cartoons.
Yeah. In that same vein, Curious George didn't have a tail. I don't think I ever really watched Curious George, so I don't have a big pony in that race. But some people are like, I swear to fucking God, he has a tail.
How about Pikachu's tail?
Yeah.
Do you remember it with the black tip or all white? Or not white?
Just no black.
Yeah. In my Mandela Effect memory, Pikachu was all white, and he was a racist, and that nobody likes him. Pokemon were very problematic.
The K sound in Pikachu was
hard K.
Yeah. Monopoly Man, Pennybags, Uncle Pennybags, Pennyworth. What is his name?
I think Moneybags.
Pennybags. Didn't wear a monocle. Although I've seen some people disputing that with different sorts of proof. Like I have a pocket version of Monopoly from 1993 that clearly look at this, and I mean, some of those kind of things are interesting to me, where somebody claims to have proof that something existed a certain way, and uh, I think since we're here on my list, one of my favorite ones is the Fruit of the Loom Mandela
Mhm.
Effect, where Um, there's not a cornucopia, but it's very easy to remember there being a cornucopia behind that logo. And to me, this is one of the more interesting ones because, like, what would be the goal in pretending that that wasn't a thing? Like, why would everybody have such a weird thing as part of this logo just in their heads that they made up somehow?
Yeah, I fall on the existence of the cornucopia side. Like I remember that. I feel like I remember that.
Yeah.
Um, if
I've
you
not seen a
asked me to
lot.
draw it, I would draw it with the cornucopia.
Yeah, I've not seen a lot of people on the side of it never existing. It seems to be most people are like, "Oh yeah, it was there. Now it's not." Um, the Shazam movie that never existed with Sinbad is another huge one that uh you search Mandela Effect, it's going to be on your top 5 list from Watch Mojo for sure. Um, but in the 90s there was a Sinbad genie movie that people swear was a thing and it never existed.
That is a weird one to me as well. Because I feel like I remember this pretty
There
well.
was a Shaq movie around that time called Kazam.
Kazam, yeah.
And I don't know if people just I don't know.
Oh,
It's interesting. If nothing, it's interesting. What about you? Any other of these like more run of the mill ones that you find
uh,
interesting?
so there's a lot of the spelling ones. Looney Tunes is it spelled with two O's, Toons, or is it spelled Tunes? Or Fruit Loops, is it spelled Fruit, fruit, or Froot, fruit, with the O's being Fruit Loops themselves? A lot of those misspelling ones, and a lot of the did this logo have a dash or no dash? And a
Yeah,
lot of the dash no dash ones, I don't have a pony in that race.
me neither.
Um,
I agree. Kit
now
Kat doesn't have a dash. Are you kidding me? I'm like, I mean, I
the
just,
one
I don't
that
know.
stands out to me is very weird, that kind of is in the same realm, is the 7-Eleven logo. If you look at a 7-Eleven logo, it has the 7 and then it spells out the word 11 in all caps,
Okay.
except the N. Everything's in all caps except the N is lowercase. So it stands out to me on so many levels. Like, one, if it was all caps, okay. If it was all lowercase, okay. But why just one lowercase level letter? It's very mind-boggling to me.
Huh. I just had to Google it to see because there's not that many 7-Elevens around
Hmm.
here. And so I had to refamiliarize myself. There's one on in Google Images that is all lowercase and it's fucking weird. I'm sure it's one that somebody just made, but I hate it. It makes me feel anxiety looking at it. I don't know why.
You
I
bring
got to
it.
get out of here.
You bring up an interesting point, Chris. So there's so much that can be done with Photoshop and computer art, and those things have come so far. Does that lead credence to some of this? Like, are people making false images and they're just off enough that they plant the seed of confusion, or you think that that is secondary to the actual confusion?
It can certainly contribute big time. Oddly, there back in the old message board days of like the mid 2000s, like before that kind of all started to go away and everybody was going to Facebook and MySpace and
Mhm.
all that. Um, I was on a lot of Kiss message boards. I swear I remember doing a Photoshop of Paul Stanley with a bald head. And if you Google Paul Stanley bald, I have a memory of making that picture, but it's so weird. And I think a little later, I have some possible medical or psychological reasonings for Mandela effects, and I think that's where my mind falls into that for this particular Photoshop. And I can see where I would have made something similar.
Mhm.
And then when I look at this one now, I'm like, I swear I made that, but a part of me is also like, I don't think I don't. Ugh. It's anybody's guess at this point. It's 20 years later,
He looks like
but it's like the picture that,
if
yeah,
Zane um what's his name? Zane Grey? Is that his name? The actor?
Zane Grey,
Billy Zane.
B-
The
Billy Zane.
the image of Paul Stanley bald looks like if Billy Zane transitioned to a woman and then transitioned back to a man. So it's disturbing to say the least.
he, it's like bald Jewish lawyer is what
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah.
It's so. But anyway, that's a thing. We'll come back around and talk about some more of that. But I think that kind of stuff, Photoshop and God, now going into AI, doing it on its own essentially will be. What will that mean for the Mandela effect in the future?
So, Rabble, if you're able to, Chris hit me with this one in the pitch for this episode. And so I want to bring this out. Thank you, Chris. Unless you're driving an 18-wheeler on the highway, get a piece of paper, get a pen, and we're going to draw two images. One, draw an image of the southeastern seaboard of the United States. Draw the little Florida dick. And then draw Central and South America in relation to Florida and where does that fall. And you can pause the podcast here and do that and come back. And the other thing is draw Australia and draw New Zealand and the relationship between those. And if for extra credit, you can draw the relationship to uh, Papua New Guinea and the uh, Southeast Asian islands, and especially when you're talking about that distance, how what's the distance there? And
Mhm.
pause, come back, and Chris,
If you
when
don't
you
have,
first
if
brought
you're
this
just
to me,
listening, draw it with your mind's eye, if nothing else,
oh yeah, yeah,
or look deep into your soul, into what you remember that being.
look at your soul, look
Um,
at me, look at your
yeah.
soul, look at me. I'm a
On a
man.
horse, look away.
Uh, but Chris, when
Where?
you
Yeah.
first did this, and when you um, did this to me, what
Yeah.
did we find?
So saw a TikTok, a random TikTok, and I wrote this down when I saw it because it blew my mind. South America is further east than I remember it being, and I'm not like map illiterate. Like I you look at a map. I mean, you can't say I look at one every day, but I mean, you look at the weather, the tropical storms every other couple weeks. I mean, you see the stuff. It and when I saw that, I was like, "There's this is wrong," and so I googled so many different maps trying to find something that looked like what I remembered, and there's really nothing. And I'm like, this is impossible. This makes me feel kind of dumb, but at the same time, I'm like, I swear that I can't be this wrong. And then I showed my wife, and she's like, it looks where I remember it. I showed Jen, and she's like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "Oh man!" And then I think I was gonna not even tell you about it because like I was like, I'm just dumb. And then I showed it to you, and what did you say? What
I
did you think?
I agreed with you. It was not just a little bit; it was substantially
Yeah,
further east than I thought it
we could shake
should
hands with
be.
Africa now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like you know, it's yeah. You reach across the ocean there, and you can fist bump over the Atlantic. It is. I did this same experiment, and this is just on the fly here, Chris. A theory I've come up with. I did the same experiment at work. I work in healthcare, female dominated, just the way I like it. But I asked 4 of my nurse manager peers to conduct the same experiment, and they drew it way east, like they thought it should be. But I have a nurse in the classroom with me this week, doing some work because he's hurt his back, so he's got to do some light duty work. So I've got him doing some audits and stuff for me. And I asked him to draw the map, and he drew like the eastern edge of South America is a straight line south from the eastern seaboard in Florida. So maybe there is a male female component to how you remember this.
Interesting.
So, but yeah, that really blew my mind. And what about the Australia one?
So I just it's been this episode has been a couple weeks in
Hmm.
the leading up to, but just today before the episode, I was like trying to find some like juicier ones I hadn't heard of that, and I found um it may have been another video. I don't even remember where I saw it from. I was so kind of shocked to find another one, but Australia and New Zealand are in different spots than I remember. Australia is way further north. And I asked you before we started the episode, where do you remember New Zealand being? And you said northeast, which is where I also thought it was. It is in fact southeast of Australia.
Yes.
And I don't know what to do with this information.
What can you buy stock in maps because they're going to have to all be remade, or uh, uh, we
I
take
don't
no
know
responsibility
why,
for
but
financial advice we give on the show.
yeah. I spent all of my money on maps and it didn't pay off.
Oh, that's strange.
But it's so weird to, and I think that goes into some of the horror of it is it's easy to kind of shrug off like the Mandela effect that, people are like, I remember this. And like some people are essentially stressed out about some of these, the lesser ones, even. It's like, I swear I saw Kazam, the
I
Sinbad
know
movie.
there
I
was
don't,
a
and
dash in Kit Kat.
they are, there's people out there that are very bothered by that. And I never really understood. I was like, so you misremembered something, whatever. But then these changes, and I experience it myself, I'm like, this is weird. I mean, to have something in your brain and then it's not what you thought, like to such a
So
degree, and you're like, what do I do with this? I mean,
I,
it's hard to
I
explain,
propose
and
that
that can.
every bad grade I ever got in school was due to the Mandela effect. I didn't misremember it. It was the Mandela effect.
See, we were born out of
Yeah.
time. We could maybe have used that now. Kids, uh, when you write your sources on your papers, put horror house from now on
We
because
are the preeminent experts in the field of everything.
yes. um. So
But Mrs.
what do
Haynes,
you
two
feel
drunk guys
of
on the
that,
internet
Dave?
told me. What was the question?
How do you feel like seeing something like that when your memory is like so clearly different than what it
The
is?
geography ones blew my mind. Um, Everything else to a lesser extent, with the exception of C3PO and his silver leg. But that one kind of messed with me a little bit too, because I mean I had the
Oh, really?
C3PO action figures. I'm a
Hmm.
lover of all things Star Wars, and
I have a theory on that
oh
one,
okay
but we'll come
okay
back to it. So, like, do you feel like a tinge of horror behind that? Like, it's like I have this memory, and now that's not the case.
the
It feels nefarious in a way
yeah
to me.
the geography ones fuck me up. I and so the horror of it is in the banality to me. Like if they can change these tiny
Mm,
things, what else am I missing? And I mean, don't get me wrong,
right.
the death of Nelson Mandela is not a tiny thing. It very inspirational and influential story. Um, so
But the events of it, the timeline of
mhm.
it,
Yeah, I mean,
like how does such a mass population get to that point where it's misremembered? Um, which is kind of scary in itself. Like if it's just a memory thing, but on a mass scale, like what could that mean?
maybe the
And
entire Earth is as it hurls through space went through a cloud of weed smoke, and we were all just like, oh man,
but
Nelson Mandela's dead, dude.
back to C3PO. I have a little bit of an idea of what maybe could have led to some
Okay.
of that. And I think maybe video quality back in the day, like in the 80s and 90s VHS and, the
Mhm.
old school TVs. And a lot of, or maybe not a lot, but especially in the first movie, is a lot of desert stuff, right? Him and R2D2 in the desert and, a silver leg reflecting all that sand. You're not, I mean, with that quality, I can see that kind of getting lost in
Sure,
translation a little
sure.
bit.
I would have thought it would translate to those original action figures, and it did not. Because those were like when the Star Wars figures came out, that started something. And
Mm.
I needed those things. That was the first crack to me was Star Wars figures. And even before we grew up poor, so we before I could get a lot, like every time I got one of me and my brothers, our favorite things to do was we would look at the sheet on the back that had the other characters,
Right.
and we would draft our armies like, oh, I'll take this one. Oh, I'll take this one. I'll take this one. I mean, you know, and argue about whose team was better. You know, so,
Ah,
but
right.
I mean, I would peruse that stuff, and I do not remember a silver leg. Um,
And it's not, I mean, what other details have you forgotten about Star Wars? I mean, looking at the back of that action figure card, right? I would wager not a lot. Like you remember, like this is what Luke looks like. This is what Obi-Wan looks like. Nothing
and
about them gets to that level of C3PO having a completely different
and
colored
and
leg.
it's not the only Star Wars based Mandela effect.
Right. Tell them. If you don't know, Dave's going to school
Spoiler alert for Star Wars Empire: Strikes Back.
you.
At the end, Luke is fighting Darth Vader, and he's clinging for life, and Darth Vader has cut off his hand, and join me. And tells Luke he's your father. He's like, does he say Luke says, "You killed my father." Does he say, "Luke, I am your father"? Or does he say, "No, I am your father"? So, I have very clear memories of speaking into the fan, because the fan gave you that mechanical
Right.
voice, that Darth Vader voice, and saying, "Luke, I am your father." So, I mean,
I mean, there was even Chris Farley and Tommy Boy with the one scene
yep.
where he's doing just that, talking into the back of a fan, saying, "Luke, I am your father." I feel like I have a foot in both camps on this one personally. Like I remember Luke, I am your father, but I also am not that affected by remembering no, I
I
am your
would
father.
absolutely accept my wrongness on Luke versus No. Long
Mhm.
before I'd say, "Oh yeah, I might have forgot a silver fucking leg on a gold robot."
um, well, since we're here, let's go through a couple more movie ones. Since I mean,
Sure.
this is the horror house. Jaws. Uh, we're gonna need a bigger boat. No, you're gonna need a bigger boat. That's one that I'm like, God damn. When I read them both side by side, I don't remember what timeline I'm from. I want to say that I remember
I
we're
That's
gonna
what
need
I
a bigger
remember.
boat, but
We're
it
gonna need
is
a bigger boat.
you are going to need a bigger boat
The
is
the
the
official,
proper
the
quote.
official in this
Proper
world.
quote. Silence of the Lambs. It is not hello, Clarice. It is good evening, Clarice, which is one I remember hello, Clarice.
Okay. Okay. Yes.
Snow White. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Nope. Nope. It's magic mirror
Yeah.
on the wall, which
I
is
leaned on the mirror side on this one.
I also. And my last little movie detail that I have is from a James Bond movie. So I contacted my best buddy Tim, uh, James Bond enthusiast, and I was like, Moonraker. I'm reading a lot about Moonraker. Jaws' girlfriend
Hmm.
smiles. Does she have braces or
I
does she
remember
not have
her with
braces?
smiles. I remember him and her very distinctly. Chris, I don't know if I know ever told you this. I had Moonraker baseball card back in the day.
Hmm. Oh,
And I remember her having braces.
she does
So they say.
not.
That's what they want you to believe. That's what they
So
want you
they
to believe.
say. So they say. I've never been that big on James Bond. I've not seen all the movies. I've seen a lot of clips though, and I remember seeing that clip personally. It seems like, and I remember braces as well. But Tim said that he hasn't
Mm,
watched it in years, but he
okay.
remembered no
Okay.
braces. So we got a lot of different collisions of timelines, which is a theory we're going to get to. Any other ones that you like? I still have several smaller scale one. Well, not smaller scale, but like more widely known ones. If you want to
Yeah,
rattle
hit us with them,
through some
Chris. Go
more,
ahead and hit us with them.
or we can just okay. So the thinker, the pose is wrong on that statue to some people. Some people believe his hand should be on his forehead, resting on his forehead, but
Yeah,
it's
idiots.
actually
I
under
call
his
them
chin.
people idiots.
I don't. This is one
I
that I
can
don't really
envision
have
him
opponent
because his
in the
fist is kind
race.
of
It's
curled up,
just
almost like he's arm wrestling with himself, and resting on his chin,
yeah.
under his chin. So,
Hmm. Another one is in Queen's song "We Are the Champions." A lot of people remember it ending with of the world, that my voice cracked naturally because I'm a vocalist in that regard. Um,
No, I
it
think
doesn't.
it is during the song,
It
but at the end of the song, it
there is
does
I
not
think a
say
lot.
of the world.
I think I saw something once that like there's a live version or something that ends like that. But the standard you're listening on a CD, the regular studio version
Side
does
note:
not.
Queen is the only
Um,
band I know of that I prefer live version.
um, Ed McMahon never worked for Publishers
Get
Clearinghouse.
the fuck out of here, Chris.
It didn't happen. He never worked for him. The prize patrol coming to
Yeah,
people's doors with
yeah.
the big check and Ed McMahon being like what was I forget the catchphrase, but that never happened. He worked for a different company called American Family Publishers. And I'm right there with you. I'm
I
like,
don't even.
what do you mean that didn't
Wow.
happen?
Okay. Okay. That one's got me. That one's got me. You might
Was it you
already be
might
a
already
winner.
be a
Yeah.
winner?
Oh,
Was that the phrase? He never worked for them. Not a thing.
okay.
I don't that's a bigger one. I could have maybe pushed that into my next category,
Wow.
but
Yeah. That one hit me. That one hit me.
and oh shit, I shouldn't
Sure.
have put okay, last one that's I wouldn't even say like smaller scale, but like and not even more well known. I just put it in here because fuck this guy. Billy Graham's televised funeral in the 90s to 2000s ish. No. I swear I remember TV being preempted and it's like Billy Graham's funeral. No, he lived until 2018.
Okay. Yeah. I mean.
Also, fuck him.
Yeah.
Fuck him
Okay.
and his son.
I agree. Agree.
But yeah,
Okay.
lived until 2018. That is not what I remember. But thank God Nelson Mandela got this named after him, and we're
Oh,
not talking about the
absolutely. I
Graham effect.
believe
Is
the
all I can
Graham
say
effect
as far as that
is
goes.
hiring the bisexual pool boy to bang your wife while you do lines of coke off his nutsack. Is the but that's named after Billy Graham's son,
Oh.
Franklin Graham. So anyway, moving.
Any other of the like more well-known ones you wanna hit on before I got a couple uh I want to say bigger ones, but they may end up not being
Why
bigger
don't you
ones. They
hit
may
us with the
just
big ones?
be
I don't have any more. I'm kind of out of anything of substance. Hit us with those,
okay.
and then we'll go
I
into
only have a
theories.
couple more. Let's okay. So King
Hmm.
Tut's death mask, Dave, has two snakes on
Two?
it. Think of King Tut's mask.
Uh huh.
The mask, the golden mask, the
Yeah, I've
death
got it in my
mask of
head. I've got
King
it in my head.
Tutankhamun. There are two snakes on there. Google it right now and look at it, and it doesn't blow my mind, but I remember one snake, and to see it this way with two, and you kind of have to like get in there and look at it, and then you're like, huh, there are two. Eh, I'm firmly in the camp that I remember one,
Okay,
but I'm also not an
maybe the
Egyptian
timeline has
scholar,
changed
so
on you now. Is that a snake? It kind of looks like a snake and a chicken.
or it may be it may not be two
Yeah,
snakes, but I
but
remember
there's
one
two
snake
things
and
on his forehead. Yeah.
period. Yeah. Two things. Yeah, I may have misspoke and said two snakes. Without really knowing what was on it. I just was like,
Okay.
there's two things on there.
Well, I
What
remember
do
one.
you
I don't. I only remember one. So
Okay. Next, and this is one I wanted to actually I'm gonna say that one first. The JFK assassination. There is some debate. The rows of seats and the number of people in the car with JFK. There were 3 rows of seats,
what?
6 people in that car. some people only remember
Yeah,
two
I remember
rows
2
and
rows
four
and
people,
3 people with
but
him. Jackie,
it
a
was
driver, and 1 Secret Service guy. Because the Secret Service guy also got hit with a magic
there
bullet.
were 6 people. Oh, I feel like I remember something about that too. But if you go look now, right now, if you go
Right?
look tomorrow, it may be changed. There are 6 people in this kind of like stretch. I don't even remember. Was it like a? I forget the type of vehicle, the brand, but yeah. And I also saw something about Jackie Onassis's actions after he got shot. And I was trying to read more into that, but I couldn't find any information after I read like a blurb somewhere and then could find nothing else about it. Like her actions were different, but when I watched, I mean, she's going, towards the back, like I remember her always
Yeah,
doing. So,
I kind of remember her going to the
um,
back. That what? Okay.
but yeah. So you remember two? You remember?
I
You
remember
don't even
3
remember four
people: a
people. You remember
driver,
three
a Secret
people.
Service agent, and then Jackie in the back with him. I've got an image and I've blown it up, and it does appear that there are more people in the car and 3 rows, but that is not absolutely not what I remember.
Yeah. And finally, my last one. And these are kind of broad, but there's been a few human anatomy
Okay.
changes, and you coming
Okay.
from a medical standpoint, you are around this. I mean, you may not be looking at the anatomy like that every day, but people swear that the heart has been moved around. Like, this is like it was on the left, and then it was back in the center, but then they moved it, that kind of thing. I'm like,
So,
I remember that.
my memory
Um,
is the heart. My knowledge. I'm going to throw it out there. My knowledge. The heart is just left of center, but also tilted slightly on an axis towards the center. So
and there is something about the skull shape being different. I didn't get too far into that one. I may need to look at that one. Rabble, if you have any more information on the
okay.
skull shape being different, please let us know. The last one, um, before we get into more discussion on the Mandela effect itself, the kidneys, Dave, are higher up than people remember them being, and behind the
They're kind
ribs.
of
Is that correct?
like not behind, but in within the rib cage, but they stick down as well.
Like
Um,
up, yeah,
yeah, they are
more in that
south of the
vicinity.
diaphragm.
And people remember them being much lower, which I mean, this is one I have absolutely no horse in this race because
That's
fuck,
not your bag, not your bag.
I didn't do great
Okay,
in
okay.
science school. Yeah. But that all of that checks out to what you have always
I
remembered.
did see
Like
the kidney
none
one,
of
and
that
the images I
falls into
see
the
are a little higher than I kind of expect, but not to the extent like people are saying. No, there should be way down here, and I'm not thinking that. But they do seem
right.
higher than seems like it should be right. So, but your
But
lower abdomen is filled with small
there
intestine,
you have it. There's a
large intestine, large and small intestine.
I just read Cujo the other day. There's a great
Mm.
scene towards the end with some intestines. It was great.
Okay.
Um, that said, there's just an absolute shit ton of Mandela effects we've went through. Let us know what your thoughts are. We're gonna hit an ad, come back, and talk about some reasonings and some of our thoughts overall about this phenomena.
We're back. We've been talking about the Mandela Effect, what it is, some examples, a ton of examples, some that seem pretty banal, and some that just kind of blow my mind. But
Yes.
Chris, Now it's time for the meat that goes with these potatoes. Uh, what are some of the popular theories as to what causes this phenomena?
I mean, do you want to go conspiracy theory, or do you want to go more uh, psychological first?
Uh, Hit us with the psychological
Okay,
first.
so
Conspiracy theories, I think, hold more
yeah.
horror.
So I read two things. I mean, this isn't the end all be all by any stretch, but two terms I came across. One is confabulation, which is a new word for me. But it
Hmm. I do know. I am familiar with that word.
the basically it's your memory or your brain generating a false memory without um the intention of it being a lie,
Hmm.
without, like, it thinks it's right. Um, and this
Yep.
can is kind of connected to a bunch of other disorders and things like that. Some alcohol memory related conditions, fetal alcohol syndrome, Alzheimer's. But your brain is kind of filling in these,
Very, very common with Alzheimer's. Very
yeah,
common with
filling in
dementia.
the your brain is filling in details, kind of, I guess, kind of like the best it can with what it has. And
Hmm.
it's doing honest work, but it's cutting some corners where it doesn't have the information it needs, which is interesting on a mass scale. I don't know what that could mean, um, you know, but there's that. And then
Okay.
two, last term is priming, which is a psychology term that is it's when a phenomenon in which exposure to a stimulus directly influences a person's response to a subsequent stimulus. So, if you're reading or hearing a word, you'll be more apt to recognize a related word after that. So, like, if you're reading and you see the word doctor and then see the word nurse later, you're going to more immediately notice the word nurse than you would some other unrelated word. Or if you're reading, or if you
Hmm.
see sports and then see ball, or, just related things, grouping kind of things. But that's priming, and uh, can be maybe some kind of an explanation for some of the effects. But those were two of the bigger ones that I come across. But your thoughts?
Confabulation is very common with Alzheimer's and dementia. Part of my job is to teach and to keep people abreast.
Hmm.
Everyone in the facility has to have a specific number of hours of dementia training every year, and a certain number of hours of dementia training before they even start work. And that's regardless of their position.
Hmm.
Um, and so one of the things we teach about is confabulation, residents telling stories because their brain can't grasp the reality of its diminished capacity. So the brain doesn't understand its own diminished
Hmm.
capacity. Very similar to the Dunning Kruger effect. I think I'm a expert at this because I have very little knowledge of what an expert actually knows.
Right.
Um, and priming, this is one of the things I talked about is briefly mentioned. If I set you up with an image or a story or present things in a certain way, it's sometimes as simple as if I'm giving you two comparison photos, which one do I expose you to first, and what language do I use when I introduce them? It's not 100%, but I can guide the bulk of people to the conclusion that I would like if I'm expert at this.
Right.
Um, so both of those are very plausible, especially for some of these very simple ones. Is there a dash in Kit Kat or not?
Hmm.
Is there, is it OSCARMEYER or MAYER. If I, which one do I expose you to first? Probably you're going to be like, oh, that's right. And then when the second one comes, then you start building cognitive dissonance, and you're like, oh no, I don't like that. So,
Right.
how about some deeper theories? Give me some of those conspiracy theories. What on a broader scale besides just being manipulated, whether by others or by my own brain,
Hmm.
what other theories are sitting lurking in the shadows behind the Mandela effect, Chris?
One is just time travel shenanigans, right? Like to put another effect with it, the butterfly effect, right? So if you a time traveler affects something small, but it has residual effects in that future that change something massively. So that could potentially. I mean, w- I'm just gonna talk like I believe this, and because it's just
Okay.
easier than being like trying to call bullshit at the whole time you're speaking. But
Mhm.
uh,
Allegedly, allegedly.
allegedly, but that's one. Another one that I really enjoy is CERN and the
Hmm.
Large Hadron Collider. Some people believe that caused some uh collision of universes, some rips in timelines colliding, and perhaps merging or throwing stuff from one to the other. So, like, you and I remember South America in a very different location. My wife doesn't. So that theory would be then that me and you are from universe A, and then she is from universe B, whichever universe we're actually on is up for debate. But there's that, which I is my favorite explanation for the Mandela effect. Is we're just on.
I personally believe we are in universe Cromulon Omega.
I love it.
So,
But those are the two big ones for me. Thoughts, Dave?
um,
My Cromulon Omega brother.
I, yes, I've heard the time travel shenanigans. Now, the scary thing to me is if someone's going back in time, they're not going back in time to add a, a lowercase letter at the end of 7-Eleven.
Right.
Something else has gone on. So, what was the actual target? What actually changed of substance? And would we know that?
Right.
Would we know that the substantive thing changed, or can we just discern the small thing? Um, Even with or without CERN, there is the bleeding universe theory, that universes are bleeding into each other. And if you're a fan of the Marvel multiverse, you know that most of these universes are very similar, with just
All right.
small changes. In our universe, Bruce Campbell is a slapstick horror comedy actor, and in another universe, he's the pizza daddy, pizza papa. So, that is a very good one. But Chris, there's also simulation theory.
Right.
And I think simulation theory seems to, over time, be getting more and more attention.
Yes.
So, what do you think, and how would you explain simulation theory?
How it's I don't know. There is a
I'm putting
whole
you on the
lot
spot here.
to unpack with that. Like we're
Mhm.
living in a simulation. Spoiler alert, we have another episode coming up later in the season that goes into more technological things like that. So there's your preview for future horror house. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that kind of stuff, really. I will watch a video on something like that and just kind of just be mesmerized by the idea of it more than I'm able to form a thought of my own to go either way against it or with it.
In my research for the show tonight, I did come across the Elon Musk quote that he thought the chances of us not living in a simulation were 1 in a billion. And then Neil deGrasse Tyson said he thought, it was a 50-50. We could be or we could not be. It's a 50-50. And I'm always going to side with Neil deGrasse Tyson over Elon Musk. So there's that. But it's an interesting theory, especially as we already see where we're at with AI. And I know right now they're talking about 100 years from now, AI will, be smarter and more creative than a human. But if we also follow the law of doubling, where every 18 months computing power doubles,
Right.
and that's slowed a little bit, but we're probably just one decent, not even huge, but one decent breakthrough in our ability to um either synthetic materials, or in our ability to manufacture something of a more diminutive size from really exploding that. And so I don't know that 100 years is enough, and we're doomed when that happens. I mean, we may be brains relegated to a simulation at that point. Yeah, we if we are in a simulation now, I don't know if there's a way that we would ever know.
Yeah.
You would have to you'd have to break out of the theory to know. If we were living in a two-dimensional plane, we would never be able to witness the third dimension.
Right.
We live in 3 dimensions. If there's a 4th dimension, we cannot perceive it at this time.
So, I mean, I saw something once. It was just a easy video. Somebody taking like they had like a 2-dimension, like just a drawing, and they took the hat off the like stick man they had and flipped it, reverse. So his hat's now on backwards. And they said, no matter what, like considering for a second that that's real, that stick man is a real thing, he could never reverse what I just did. He would be completely shocked by the idea that his hat is now in reverse and cannot be unreversed because it can't be flipped the opposite way. And I'm like, what? And like you said, I don't got me a marijuana cigarette, but some of this stuff makes me feel like I did, and it's never.
I feel like I have to interrupt for just a moment, Chris, and warn the kids. If you're listening, stay away from pot needles. Okay, go on.
Dare to avoid needles.
Yeah, pot needles are dangerous.
That's it for me. I mean, we have actually a couple more episodes going into some technological kind of what ifs and beyond. So stick around for those. Anything else that you want to cover, Dave, on the Mandela Effect before we close the doors and get out of the whorehouse once again?
I did. I'll just bring up 2 quick pop culture references. One is the '90s movie, The 13th Floor. We both have seen that, although it's for both of us been a long time. I started watching it again the other day, about simulation theory. They have developed a simulation. His boss is murdered, so he goes into the simulation to find out why his boss is murdered, and finds out that even in his real world is actually a simulation. It's a simulation within a simulation within a simulation.
Layers,
and could go on in perpetuity, a la the microverse battery in Rick and Morty. And then there's also the Mandela Effect on Hulu, which I thought was really good. They lose their daughter, and this guy's pretty distraught. So he starts doing research. Comes up with all these things. He's figuring all this weird stuff out. He hooks up with a professor who tells him, if we're in a simulation, there's the computing power is probably has some kind of limit. So if I take a building, for instance, that's empty, the computer is not going to be simulating the inside of that building, because why would it? Much like a video game, I'm only going to render what can be seen or interacted with. And
Right.
so he said he had, within the simulation, built an app that would basically give intention to all of those spaces. Therefore, the simulation would have to render those things and significantly degrade the quality of the simulation. And so he gets his daughter back. The guy gets his daughter back through this, but then he can't he has to know more. He's not satisfied. Even though his daughter's back, he's not satisfied.
First taste is
and
free.
there's still some glitches and stuff, so he goes, and the guy has killed himself, but he runs the program, and then on the way home, like, this woman glitches through the floor of the bus, and he's lag walking through the house to get to his family, and it's a horrific idea. I seem to remember a UFO movie too from several years ago where a couple lost their child, and she can't let it go, and other people seem to have forgotten that the kid even existed, but she has this nagging memory, and
Oh,
come to find out it was because the aliens had took the kid and rewrote
Julianne
everybody's
Moore,
memory.
right?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes.
I know what you're talking about. I forget the name of the movie. Yeah,
But it was very, very horrific, very horrific.
we'll have to check that out. I
So
forget the name of that. But there you go. There's some movies to check out. In the meantime, Dave, I think it's time. The electric bill in the horror house is coming due. We gotta
we gotta
we
get
gotta
out
get
of here before we're on candle power. If you have something you would like to bring up, you have a comment about a past episode, something you'd suggest for us to do in the future, or even just hit us up and tell us a tale.
what Mandela
Um,
effects do you believe in,
yeah.
or adamantly don't believe in?
If you hate your little brother, and you like, oh, my brother's not real, he's a Mandela effect, okay, let us know why you think that. You can do that on Twitter at Sweetness1 with 6 E's, or at Horror House 2, because there are two of us.
You can email us, horrorhousepodcast@gmail.com, or you can go to the Horror House page on Facebook.
You could leave us a voicemail, and then we can listen to your voice and share your voice with the rest of the rabble. You can leave us that voicemail on anchor.fm/horror house.
Last but not least, wherever you're listening, rate us, share us, and that just helps your old horror house boys out. And you can get more episodes that way, man. Hey,
Yeah,
what's better than that?
if we
Just do
can
it.
get our goal this season is to get to 100 followers. We may not make it. It doesn't seem like much. I think it's a pretty modest goal. I think we can do it. I think you can do it, and we're depending on you. If we can get to 100
On
Spotify
Spotify,
followers,
yeah,
then
we're
we
halfway there.
can
We're sitting at
really
50.
start expanding some of the things we can do here, and really build out our little corner of the horror universe. So thank you for your listening, thank you for your support, and what is it, what do we say, Chris? We're out.
Same cemetery, different grave. We've not done that in a
There
minute.
we go.
All right, we're out.
Later.